all began when I was 9 years old. My mother brought home our first adopted baby, a premature Filipino infant who needed oxygen support every few hours. She filmed me holding him for her very first campaign video, narrating how it demonstrated our entire family's dedication to saving lives. I didn't realize it then, but that was the launch of her GoFundMe career. At the time I turned 17, I was essentially raising 8 children. A profound exhaustion had settled deep into my bones. One day, she showed me photos on her phone at the kitchen counter, 3 siblings from Moldova, all under the age of 2. One had developmental delays requiring constant therapy. "Mom, I can't do this anymore," I told her, my voice trembling with the dread of her reaction. She tilted her head in that familiar, manipulative way. "Are you saying you won't help these innocent children?" "I'm saying I'm 17 and I'm drowning." That night, after everyone was asleep, she came to my room. Her voice was a quiet, frightening whisper. "Fine, don't help." She pulled up their medical files on her phone. "But either you care for them or they suffer, your choice. And imagine what happens to the donations when people find out these kids aren't getting proper care." She knew exactly what she was doing. She had trained me since I was 9 to put them first. The next morning, I decided to test her. I just wanted to attend one AP history class. When I returned home, I found 4-year-old Marky on the kitchen floor, his lips turning blue from an allergic reaction. My mother was on the couch, updating her latest campaign post about the sacrifices a mother makes. "Accidents happen when you're selfish," she said without looking up. "Maybe I should mention in my next update how overwhelmed I am doing this alone." My hands shook as I jabbed the EpiPen into Marky's thigh. He gasped, started crying, and as I held him, I felt something fundamental shift inside me. She had let him nearly die just to prove a point. Later that evening, something in me finally broke. I walked in on my mother with all the children who could talk, sitting in a circle. "What do we tell people who donate to help us?" she asked in her saccharine sweet voice. 6-year-old Lily was crying. "But you're mean to Farah, that's my name." My mother's face turned cold. "I'm the only one keeping this family together," she hissed. "The only one raising money to keep you fed. Now, what do we say?" The children chorused back in tiny, terrified voices. "Thank you for helping Mommy save us. We love you very much." She made them practice it 5 more times, each recitation louder and more broken than the last. Then she filmed them saying it for her next campaign update. In that moment, I decided that if she wanted me to give it my all, I would, just not in the way she expected. I stopped fighting her and dropped out of school, though not officially, I just stopped going. On the rare occasions I did show up, I brought the toddlers with me. When my calculus teacher asked who they were, I told her they were mine. I wanted everyone to see. I wanted them all to wonder why a 17-year-old had 3 toddlers in class during an exam. I started using her credit cards at the medical supply store, spending $600 in a single transaction. When the pharmacy flagged the purchase, I calmly told them my mother had asked me to pick everything up. I made sure they noted that a teenager was buying hundreds of dollars worth of prescriptions alone. Weeks later, she announced over dinner that she was adopting premature twins with kidney issues. "Already started a new campaign," she said, shoving her phone in my face. 60,000 raised in 3 days. People love medical emergency stories. The twins would need daily dialysis support. The agency needs proof of a full-time caregiver," she added casually. "I told them you'd defer college." Next morning, she left for a 5-day donor appreciation retreat in Killarney, Ireland. She left me with nothing but a note scribbled with the twins' feeding schedules. One twins monitor alarmed every single hour when his levels dropped. By day 3, I was a ghost of myself, trying to manage the dialysis schedule when Ava started choking on her breakfast. I had a twin under each arm, trying to help her as she turned purple. That was the moment I finally called 911. The paramedics found me sobbing, covered in baby vomit, desperately trying to manage 14 children. When they asked where my parents were, I showed them my mother's text from Ireland. "Handle it. I'm networking with major donors." They took us all to the hospital, including me. I was diagnosed with stress-induced arthritis and mild dwarfism. My body was literally breaking down from the strain. It was there, in the sterile hospital light, that a nurse named Deborah Schroeder crouched before me and said the words that changed everything. "Did you know she's collecting $11,000 a month in adoption subsidies on top of her GoFundMe campaigns?" My knees buckled. "You've been building this case for months," she said quietly. "Your teachers, the paramedics, the pharmacy, everyone saw it. We just couldn't prove it until now." I smiled. My mother would be home in 2 days, having no idea what was waiting for her. I sat in the hospital waiting room, my hands clamped tightly between my knees to stop their shaking. Deborah, the nurse, kept appearing every 20 minutes with juice boxes, patiently puncturing the foil for me when my fumbling fingers couldn't manage. Down the hallway, I could hear the muffled sounds of Child Protective Services interviewing each of my siblings in separate rooms. Lily's crying echoed from behind one of the doors, and my every instinct screamed at me to go to her. But Deborah's steadying hand on my shoulder kept me rooted to the plastic chair. For 2 agonizing hours, a social worker named Jenny sat beside me. Her face was gentle, which made my throat constrict. She explained that all 14 children were being placed into emergency protective custody immediately. I would be going to a specialized foster home for older teens who had experienced parentification and exploitation. Words didn't fully register at first. My mind was still on the twins' dialysis schedule, worrying if a foster family would know how to manage the alarms. "Can I stay with the little ones?" I asked, my voice thin and reedy. "They'll be so scared without me." Jenny shook her head gently. "Part of your healing," she explained, "means learning that you aren't responsible for them anymore." She said the younger children were going to trained foster families who could provide the care they actually needed. Her tone was kind, but her words felt like being torn in half. Deborah then took my hands, pulling them from between my knees. I stared at them as if they belonged to a stranger. My knuckles were swollen and red, the joints twisted unnaturally. "Your body has been screaming for help for probably years," Deborah said softly. "The arthritis was from chronic stress, and my stomach growth, I was 4 inches shorter than I should have been, was the result of malnutrition, as I always fed the babies first and barely ate myself." Then Detective Nathaniel Harper arrived. He had kind eyes but a direct, serious voice. He explained they had been watching our house for 6 weeks after my calculus teacher reported seeing me with 3 toddlers during finals. The pharmacy had flagged my purchases, and the paramedics from Marky's allergic reaction had filed a report. Every single person I had desperately hoped would notice had been billing a case all along. I started to cry, great heaving sobs of relief and grief. Harper handed me tissues and said, "That's exactly what your mother wanted you to believe, that you were alone, that no one cared." That night, Jenny drove me to my new foster home. The woman who answered the door, Alana Gallagher, had warm eyes and gray streaks in her dark hair. She wore a soft sweater and jeans. "You don't have to take care of anyone here," she told me immediately. "Not even yourself if you don't want to. I'll handle everything." She showed me to a small bedroom at the end of a hall. It had a real bed with a thick comforter, a desk with a lamp, and a door with a lock that only I controlled. I started crying again because I hadn't had privacy in 8 years. Alana didn't try to hug me. She just sat on the floor with me and waited until my tears subsided. That first night, Alana helped me into the bathroom, showed me where the towels were, and left me alone to shower. I stood under the hot water until it ran cold, savoring the unprecedented silence, the absence of anyone banging on the door demanding I hurry. When I emerged in the clean pajamas she had left for me, I found her sitting in the hallway reading a book. She walked me to my room, showed me how the lock worked from the inside, and told me she would be downstairs if I needed anything. Climbed into the soft bed, closed my eyes, and waited for a sleep that wouldn't come. The house was terrifyingly quiet. My body was exhausted, but my brain was stuck on high alert, listening for the beep of a monitor or a toddler's cry. Around midnight, I got up and checked the door lock 3 times. I ended up sitting on the floor with my back against the bed, just listening to the dangerous silence, convinced something terrible was happening because I wasn't watching the kids. 3 in the morning, Alana knocked softly. She didn't ask why I was on the floor. She just sat beside me. She explained this was normal. My body had been running on stress for so long it didn't know how to feel safe. "It will take time for your body to understand that the babies are okay without you," she said. We sat together for 20 minutes before I followed her downstairs, where the quiet felt less oppressive than did in my room. She made chamomile tea, and we sat at the kitchen table not talking until the sun came up. Next morning, the smell of pancakes and bacon that Alana cooked made my stomach hurt. It was a visceral reminder that I couldn't recall the last time someone had cooked for me. She put a full plate in front of me and told me to sit. I shoveled the food into my mouth with the frantic haste of someone who might have her plate taken away at any second. Alana watched me for a moment before saying gently, "There's plenty more. No one is going to take your plate away." Heat rushed to my face in shame, and I forced myself to slow down, to actually taste the food. At afternoon, Jenny arrived with a folder full of updates. She sat with Alana and me at the kitchen table and went through each of my siblings, one by one. The babies were settling in with families experienced in medical needs. The toddlers were safe, fed, and confused, asking for me. The older kids, like Lily, were in therapeutic placements. Jenny showed me a photo of Lily smiling, a real, genuine smile at a park, not the forced one for a camera. "You did an amazing job keeping them alive under impossible conditions," Jenny said, "but now it's time to let the adults handle it." That evening, Detective Harper called my new phone. He said my mother's flight was landing the next morning and that police would be waiting to arrest her. He needed me to come to the station to give a formal statement. I felt sick at the thought, but I agreed. "You are incredibly brave," Harper told me. "What you did by creating that paper trail probably saved those kids' lives." After I hung up, I sat on my bed and thought of my mother on that plane, sleeping or watching a movie, completely oblivious to the life that was about to shatter. The next afternoon, Jenny drove me to the police station. Detective Harper met us in a small, stark room with a recording device. He asked me to tell him everything from the beginning, so I started talking. I described being 9 years old and holding that first baby for the campaign video. Told him about the ever-growing number of children, the coaching sessions where my mother made them practice lines for donor videos, finding Marky Blue on the floor while she typed on her phone, and the night she threatened me in my room. I recounted the relentless beeping of the twins' monitor and the terror of seeing off a choke. My voice grew hoarse and my hands shook, but I didn't stop until I felt completely empty. Harper thanked me, his expression telling me I had done something right. And he opened a folder, revealing the cold, hard evidence. There were bank statements documenting the $11,000 in monthly adoption subsidies. Printouts showed GoFundMe campaigns spanning 8 years, totaling over $400,000. Spreadsheets meticulously tracked where the money actually went versus what my mother had claimed. Harper explained she had been running a sophisticated financial exploitation scheme, using the children's medical needs to generate sympathy while spending most of the donations on herself. He showed me receipts for designer clothes, spa treatments, and expensive restaurants, all paid for with money donors believed was saving sick children. He delivered the final, crushing blow. My mother hadn't been at a donor retreat in Ireland. She had been at a luxury resort. Harper showed me screenshots from her social media, photos of her getting a massage, eating fancy meals by a pool, lounging in a hotel robe. The captions talked about the hardships of being a single mother and how she deserved this time to recharge. While I had been fighting to keep children alive, she had been at a spa, spending the money meant for their care. Cold certainty settled in my chest. This wasn't about being overwhelmed. It was calculated, cruel greed. Back at Alana's, the reality of what I had done crashed down on me that night. My mother would know I had reported her. She would hate me. Panic seized me, my heart hammering, my vision blurring. Alana found me gasping on the floor and calmly talked me through it, reminding me I was safe, that I had protected children who couldn't protect themselves. "You found a way to save everyone, including yourself," she said. "That takes more courage than most adults have." The next morning, Harper called. My mother had been arrested at the airport and was being held without bail. She had immediately asked for her phone to post about the misunderstanding on social media, but her devices had been seized as evidence. It was done. For the first time in 8 years, I didn't have to take care of anyone but myself. The feeling was terrifying, and it was liberating. The frazzled piece lasted only 12 hours. The next morning, a news alert buzzed on Alana's phone. The headline was stark: "Woman arrested for adoption fraud and child exploitation." The article detailed the GoFundMe campaigns, the $400,000 in donations, and the $11,000 in monthly subsidies. The comment section was a torrent of fury from betrayed donors, some demanding refunds, others confessing they had suspected something was wrong but didn't know how to report it. I felt sick reading it, but also a strange sense of vindication. People were finally seeing the truth. And he called an hour later, reporting that the police tip line was flooded with calls from former followers and donors. They provided screenshots and records, all helping to build an irrefutable case. One woman revealed she had tried to send gifts directly to the kids, but my mother insisted on cash only. Another had asked to visit for months, only to be blocked. These people had wanted to help, but were manipulated by my mother's facade. 3 days later, Jenny drove me to my first therapy appointment. The counselor, Sarah, had kind eyes and specialized in complex trauma. She explained that what my mother had done was a form of human trafficking, using children for labor and financial gain while denying them basic care. The word trafficked hit me with physical force. I had always associated it with kidnapping, not the systematic exploitation I had endured. It was serious, it was criminal, and it wasn't your fault, Sarah said, her words beginning to dismantle a lifetime of guilt. That same week, Alana enrolled me in an online school program. Sitting at the kitchen table with a laptop, staring at a simple English essay assignment, I started to cry. For the first time, I could focus on homework without listening for crying or monitoring a medical schedule. Alana hugged me and said, "This is what your life should have been all along." Harper called the next day with a chilling update. Forensic accountants had found that my mother spent less than 30% of the donations on the children's actual needs. The rest funded her luxury lifestyle. Then he delivered news that made my stomach drop. The premature twins had a surviving birth mother in the Philippines. She had been told they died shortly after birth. The adoption agency had falsified death certificates and sold the babies. My mother's web of deceit was far wider and more sinister than I had ever imagined. 3 weeks after the arrest, I had my first family court hearing. Jenny walked me through the courthouse security, my hands trembling so violently I could barely hold my phone. We entered the courtroom, and there she was. My mother sat at a table in an orange jumpsuit, handcuffs on her wrists. She looked smaller, tired. When she tried to make eye contact, Jenny immediately stepped between us, a solid, protective wall. The judge asked me to take the witness stand. I swore to tell the truth, and the prosecutor began his questions. He asked about the conditions in the house, my responsibilities, how much sleep I got. My voice shook, but I answered as clearly as I could. Then he asked me to describe the day of Marky's allergic reaction. I took a breath and began. I told them about wanting to go to one AP history class, about coming home to find Marky on the kitchen floor, his lips turning blue. I described my mother on the couch, updating her campaign, her chilling words, "Accidents happen when you're selfish." I recounted jabbing the EpiPen into his thigh while he was dying, and she was typing on her phone. I watched the judge's face. Her neutral, professional expression shifted to wide-eyed horror, her mouth tightening into a thin line. When I finished, she looked at my mother with pure disgust. She immediately ordered all children to remain in protective custody and terminated my mother's parental rights on an emergency basis. My mother started to stand and protest, but her lawyer pulled her back down. After court, my mother's lawyer approached me in the hallway, asking if I would speak to her. Before I could respond, Jenny stepped between us, her voice firm. "Contact is prohibited." The lawyer tried to hand me his business card. Jenny took it and threw it directly into a trash can. She turned to me. "You never have to speak to her again if you don't want to. Not now, not ever. It is completely your choice. She has stolen enough from you." At night at Alana's, the nightmares began. I woke up at 2 a.m., gasping, my heart pounding from a dream where I couldn't reach the twins as their monitors screamed. Alana heard me and sat on the edge of my bed, her presence a calm anchor. She reminded me, as she would many times after, that the babies were safe, that adults were caring for them now, and that it was no longer my job. The nightmares kept coming, but so did her patient reassurance. 3 weeks after the court hearing, Harper called with good news. Marky, Lily, and their biological brother had been matched with a foster family who wanted to adopt all 3 of them together. The family had experience with children who had endured trauma and were trained to manage Marky's allergies. When I asked if I could see them, Harper said he would put in a good word. A few days later, Jenny arranged a supervised video call with Lily. When her face appeared on the screen, she looked different, healthier, less haunted. She told me she had her own bed with a purple blanket she had chosen herself. She was going to a real school, eating lunch in a cafeteria, and her new parents read her stories at night. "They don't make me say thank you to strangers on camera," she whispered. Then she said something that shattered me. "My therapist told me it's okay to just be a kid and not have to perform or take care of anyone." The next week, Jenny drove me to meet with the criminal prosecutor, Darren Castillo. In his office, surrounded by highlighted papers, he laid out the charges: multiple counts of fraud, child exploitation, endangerment, and falsifying documents. He said if convicted, my mother faced 15 to 25 years in prison. Her defense, he explained, was trying to paint her as an overwhelmed single mother, but the evidence of deliberate fraud, especially the testimony about her letting Marky nearly die, made that defense weak. "This was calculated exploitation," Castillo said, "and the jury will see that." He then revealed the investigation had shut down the adoption agency. It was a trafficking operation that had lied to poor families, telling mothers their babies had died when they were actually sold. The twins' case was especially egregious. Their birth mother had never consented to the adoption. The scope of the cruelty was staggering. Back at Alana's, she helped me fill out paperwork for victims' compensation, which could cover my therapy, medical expenses, and even future college costs. "Accepting help doesn't make you weak," she reminded me. "You deserve support." 4 months after the arrest, I attended a hearing where the judge reviewed permanent placement plans for my siblings. I sat in the gallery and listened as the judge approved each one. Some were being adopted by their foster families, others were being reunified with birth relatives who had been found. I cried as the judge made it official. My siblings were going to other families, and I would never see some of them again. Jenny squeezed my hand, a silent acknowledgement of my grief. Week after that hearing, Jenny called with incredible news. The twins' birth mother, a young woman named Maria from the Philippines, was flying to the United States with the help of an advocacy group. Jenny arranged a video call. When the connection stabilized, I saw a woman in her mid-20s with the same eyes as the twins. She was crying before anyone spoke. Through a translator, she told me she had been told her babies died minutes after birth because they were too premature. Hospital claimed to have disposed of the bodies. She never knew they had survived, never knew they had been taken to another country. She thanked me over and over for saving their lives by calling 911. She was now working with lawyers to get them back. I told her the twins were beautiful and strong. After the call, I felt a profound sense of closure. I had helped bring them home in more ways than one. Jenny then arranged for me to have supervised visits with my siblings, explaining that our relationship needed to change. Before, you were their sister parent, she said. Now, you can just be their sister. It sounded healthy, but the idea terrified me. Caring for them was all I had known. My first visit was with Marky and Lily at a family center. When I walked into the bright playroom, Marky ran and hugged my legs, then pulled back, unsure. Lily hung back, holding her foster mother Rebecca's hand. I stood frozen, every instinct screaming to check if they had eaten or needed the bathroom. Rebecca sat on the floor, patted the space beside her, and handed me a plastic spatula. We're making a feast, she said. For 20 minutes, I just played. I flipped pretend pancakes, and Lily giggled as she added pretend syrup. When Marky crashed his truck into the toy refrigerator, we all laughed. It was the first time I had been with them without being responsible for their survival. Days later, Harper called while I was helping Alana fold laundry. He said my mother's trial date was set and asked if I would testify in person. My hand shook and I dropped the towel I was holding. He said my testimony would be powerful, but I didn't have to decide right away. I thought of Marky turning blue on the floor. Yes, I told him. I'll do it. After I hung up, Alana found me staring at the ceiling. She suggested a support group for parentified teens. Hearing others share stories like mine made me feel less alone. The boy who cared for his disabled dad nodded in understanding when I described feeling like I was the only one keeping everyone alive. For the first time, I felt my experience was validated, not just pitied. 5 months crawled by, marked by weekly therapy and bi-weekly visits with my siblings. Then, Prosecutor Castell called me to his office. He explained that my mother's defense team was offering a plea deal. She would plead guilty to reduced charges in exchange for a 12-year state prison sentence. The choice to accept the deal or go to trial was mine. A trial could mean a longer sentence, but would force me to testify and face cross-examination. I had 1 week to decide. That night, I made a list of pros and cons. I talked it through with Jenny and my therapist. Alana reminded me that 12 years meant the youngest children would be adults before my mother was released. I thought of Lily learning to be a kid and the twins safely home with their real mother. 3 days later, I called Castillo. I want to accept the plea, I told him. The certainty of 12 years felt safer than the risk of a trial. Plea hearing happened on a cold, late March morning. With Jenny and Alana behind me, I watched my mother stand before the judge in her orange jumpsuit. In a small, defeated voice, she confirmed she was giving up her right to trial. Then, she had to allocute to state out loud what she had done. She admitted to exploiting children for financial gain. She admitted to falsifying medical emergencies to drive donations. She admitted to endangering lives through neglect. With each admission, a weight I had carried for years finally lifted. The judge asked if everything she said was true. Yes, she whispered. I saw no remorse in her face, only resignation at being caught. The validation was overwhelming. Weeks later, we returned for sentencing. The judge reviewed the case files, the victim impact statements, and the forensic reports. She sentenced my mother to 12 years in state prison, plus 10 years of probation, during which she would be prohibited from fostering, adopting, or running any fundraising campaigns. She was also ordered to pay restitution to the defrauded donors and the state. Her face remained a blank mask. Afterward in the hallway, Castillo asked if I wanted a no-contact order that would extend beyond her sentence. Yes, I said immediately, without a moment's hesitation. On the drive home, Jenny explained that with the criminal case over, we could focus on my permanency plan. She asked if I wanted to stay with Alana long-term. I looked out the window at the budding spring leaves and realized I already thought of Alana's house as home. That evening, Alana sat with me and said she would be happy to be my foster mother through high school and beyond. I've watched you change, she said, and I want to keep being part of that. I cried because, for the first time, someone had said they wanted to keep me. 2 weeks later, Jenny brought over the paperwork to make my placement with Alana official. Signing the forms, changing my status from emergency to long-term foster care, felt monumental, like I was finally building something permanent. To celebrate, Alana took me to Target to redecorate my room. I chose posters of bands I genuinely liked, not the kid-friendly decor my mother used as props. I picked out dark blue curtains and a desk lamp shaped like a rocket because I'd once mentioned wanting to be an astronaut. Hanging those posters felt like claiming my own identity. 6 months after the arrest, with Jenny's help, I re-enrolled in high school part-time. My teachers were briefed and understanding. Sitting in junior year English, I realized I was just a student learning. I wasn't simultaneously managing a mental checklist of who needed to be fed or which medical alarm was about to sound. My history teacher celebrated my first on-time essay, and I felt a pride I hadn't known in years. I even joined the debate team, finding I was good at constructing arguments, a skill honed from years of anticipating my mother's manipulations. And he arranged for me to have dinner at the home of Lily and Marky's adopted family, the Trotters. Their house was comfortably chaotic with play with toys, not the staged chaos of my mother's home. Lily chattered about her new school and dance classes. Marky showed me his room with dinosaur sheets and glow-in-the-dark stars. During dinner, Mr. and Mrs. Trotter asked about my school and made sure I had enough food, parenting my siblings in the way they always should have been parented. As I left, Lily asked if I could come back next month. Of course, Mrs. Trotter said. You're always welcome. Driving home, I felt a bittersweet mix of sadness and joy, sad I wasn't raising them, but overwhelmingly happy they were thriving. Next week, Jenny brought me a translated letter from Maria, the twins' birth mother. She included photos of the twins, now almost 2, smiling real smiles in a bright room with their grandmother. She wrote that they were healthy, their kidney issues managed by doctors in Manila, and that they were surrounded by a loving extended family. She said she cried every day, grateful to have them back. I kept those photos in my desk drawer, looking at them whenever I needed a reminder that profound good had come from the darkness. I started volunteering at a local organization that helped foster kids navigate the system. Sharing my story with them felt useful. It made other kids feel less alone. The director asked me to speak at a fundraiser about adoption reform, and despite my fear, I said yes. Standing before 50 people, I detailed my mother's exploitation and the critical need for better oversight. Turning my trauma into a force for potential change felt powerful, like I was reclaiming my voice. Lana helped me apply to colleges, specifically targeting those with strong support programs for foster youth. We worked for weeks on my application essay, framing my story around resilience and advocacy, not victimhood. When acceptance letters started arriving in the spring, I was astounded. 5 schools offered me full scholarships, covering tuition, room, and board. My school counselor told me my essay was incredibly powerful, that admissions committees saw someone who would make a difference. I chose a state school 3 hours away with a strong social work program, close enough to visit Alana and my siblings, but far enough for a true fresh start. On what would have been my mother's birthday in April, I broke down. Alana found me crying in my room, clutching a photo of us from when I was 9, right after the first baby arrived. We were both smiling, blissfully unaware of the future. I hate that I still miss the mother I thought she was, I sobbed. Alana called my therapist, who explained over the phone that grieving the parent I needed was different from excusing the parent I had. Trauma doesn't erase love, even when it should, she said. The grief lasted for 2 days, but emerging from it, I felt lighter, as if I had given myself permission to feel the full, complicated truth. In May, I attended the hearing where the adoption of Marky, Lily, and their sibling was finalized. The judge asked the kids if they wanted to be adopted. Lily's yes was clear and happy. Marky nodded so hard his whole body shook. When the judge made it official, I cried tears of pure joy. They had a forever family. Afterward, at a celebration lunch, Mrs. Trotter told me, "You will always be their sister. We want you in their lives." Lily hugged me and whispered, "I love you." And I knew, with absolute certainty, that I had helped give her this chance at a real childhood. The following week, Jenny showed me photos that brought a new wave of tears. 4 of my former siblings had been reunified with their birth families after the investigation proved the adoption agency had lied. One little girl was in Guatemala with her mother, who had been told her daughter died during childbirth. 2 brothers were in Texas with their father, who had been promised a temporary foster placement. Another boy was in Vietnam, surrounded by his extended family. Seeing them back where they belonged filled me with a profound joy that outweighed my own sense of loss. They were home. In September, I gave a presentation at a school assembly about adoption fraud and parentification. My hands shook, but I spoke to 300 students about the warning signs, how exploitation can hide behind charity, and that children should not raise children. Afterward, 7 students confided in me about their own hidden burdens caring for siblings, working as unpaid labor, lying to social workers. The school counselor asked me to help develop a peer support program, and I agreed without hesitation. No one should feel as alone as I had. Lana and I built our own traditions. Friday movie nights, where I could choose the film without managing anyone else's needs. She taught me to cook for pleasure, not just survival. We took weekend trips, and she bought me clothes that I picked out myself. I was learning, day by day, what it felt like to be cared for, and some days the sheer normality of it felt so foreign I wanted to retreat to the familiar chaos. But I was healing. A year after my mother's arrest, I testified before a state legislative committee. I sat at a table with a microphone and explained exactly how my mother had exploited the system, presenting documentation of the gaps that had allowed her to operate for years. 3 months later, Jen called to tell me my testimony had helped pass new legislation, dubbed the Twins Law, requiring monthly home visits for large adoptive families and annual financial audits of subsidy spending. I cried. It meant other kids might be protected in ways I wasn't. That winter, a letter arrived from the court. A group of GoFundMe donors, horrified by the fraud, had contributed to a trust fund for me and my siblings' education and therapy. It held over $100,000, a bittersweet redemption of their original, betrayed intentions. I started my senior year living a life I could barely have imagined. I had friends, I was on the debate team, and Alana was teaching me to drive. I was making call. Edge plans to study social work, my future focused on helping other kids escape exploitation. The difference between who I was a year ago and who I was becoming felt immense. I could sleep through the night. I could eat a meal without calculating if it was enough for 14 others. On the anniversary of the 911 call, I met Lily and Marky at a park. Lily showed me a family drawing. She had included me as her big sister, separate from her parents. Marky asked if I was proud of how high he could swing. I told him I was. Watching them get into their family's car, I finally understood. They were healing, and so was I, all of us, in our own ways and at our own pace. I turned 18. I was free. My mother was in prison. The children were safe. I had a future, not just a crisis to manage. I had spent years being told I was selfish for wanting my own life. Now I knew that taking care of myself wasn't selfish at all. It was survival, and it was the beginning of everything.